Hey everybody, the time's 9 o'clock and we're gonna start the meeting. So I see some new faces here and I was wondering if we can all go around and just introduce ourselves so we can all get acquainted. I'm Sarah Garcia, I'm a board member.
Gabe Edgar, Superintendent of Schools.
Ashley McGinnis, Assistant Superintendent of Academic Services.
Reba Kendall, concerned citizen.
Kim Miller, Board Member.
Kenneth Leader, Board Member.
Dave Foster, President of the Board.
Kimberly Hay, Interested Citizen.
Eileen Houston-Stewart, Director of Communications.
Kendra Lau, Director of Assessment.
Ela Curriculum, Director of Special Programs.
Laura Gilpin, Director of Secondary Ed.
Bethany Clark, Director of Elementary Ed.
Stacia Studer, Curriculum Instruction. Kara Anderson, Assistant Director of Special Programs. Rebecca Lavina, volunteer.
Don Baker, Board Secretary.
Okay, so our first item of discussion is assessment data for diagnostics 1.
Yeah, so I think this has made its way around, if you have this little handout right here. And so this is this is just our beginning of the year testing. And so we do beginning of the year testing every year. We use a platform that's called iReady, and it's widely used across the state. And it simply lets us know how kids are doing right out of the chute. So it doesn't tell us where we're going to necessarily, this data isn't telling us where we're going to end up. It's just telling us where we're beginning, if that makes sense. So one of the things, and on this first page, you see it's on page 9, and that is actually math data. So if you want to pencil that in, it didn't seem to copy. That is actually our math data. And so you'll notice that there's some different levels. And so the darker green is mid or above grade level. The lighter green is early on grade level. And yellow is 1 grade level below. So I'm going to stop right there for a second just so that we kind of know what we're looking at as we go forward. It'll go more quickly. All of those areas, those percentages, we expect to see at the beginning of the year. So for example, if a student is just finished 2nd grade and they're going to be headed into 3rd grade, it would make sense that they're 1 grade level below. And so for students that are mid on grade or early on grade, that's even better. So I just wanted to pause and let you know that when you look at beginning of the year data. Now if we look at the end of the year data, and that's still the case, those same percentages, then that would be more cause for concern. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear because it's beginning of the year data. And then we have, in the lighter red, we have 2 grade levels below, and then in the darker red, we have 3 grade levels below, or more grade levels below, 3+. So what you're seeing there in terms of comparisons is our 19-20 school year. There's a little asterisk there. And then our 21-22 school year. And right now, this is the beginning of the 22-23 school year. So that's what you're seeing in terms of comparisons. So as you can imagine, the year 19-20, we only got through our beginning of the year diagnostic and our middle of the year diagnostic before we went into closure. And that's the year that the state didn't do statewide testing either. Okay, and so we have that there because that would give us a benchmark to look back to or harken back to in terms of what kind of percentages we had before COVID and what we're seeing at the beginning of the year now. And so that's kind of why that's why it's laid out that way. And so you can see that, in 19-20, the beginning of the year, what we tend to look at is our 3 grade levels and below. And so we had about 15%, now we're at about 18%. So that's about a 3% increase at the beginning of the year. And so that's a heavy lift for teachers to move a student that's 3 grade levels or more below all the way up to grade level in 1 year. Okay, and so that's why we have those intervention levels that we have. And then you can see in the lighter red, we have somewhere between about 3% that are 2 grade levels and below. So again, those are things that we look at the beginning of the year. But at the same time, you can see that 1 grade level below, we're about 6% off of where we were in 1920 when we started the year. But in terms of on grade level or early on grade level, we seem to be making a little ground, especially from last year. And again, this is in mathematics. I will say last year, we've never seen our kindergartners come in as low as they did last year. And so seeing this particular trend is more positive than negative. The other thing I will tell you that in terms of summer learning loss, and when we looked at our end of year diagnostic and we looked at our beginning of the year diagnostic in math, we didn't lose a lot of ground over the summer. And I think we can really thank the intense focus this summer on continued learning in summer school. And so that was also good because there's not a lot of time to make up that instruction that we saw during the loss that we sort of saw during COVID. And so that was beneficial to really utilize that time. Now if you look at the next page, and again this continues to be math. The next page, so since we've already kind of got on we're already kind of tracking with what the different levels mean, what you'll see there on this page is 4 comparisons. And so what we're looking at is historical national norms from fall 18-19. So when we say historical national norms, what we're really talking about is all the users across our nation that use iReady. And it's a big pile of students, so it's a stable data set for us to look back on. We put that there again because it lets us have a benchmark for where do we need to get back to, and then really start accelerating that learning. So you can see there that when you then look at national in-school fall this year, okay, so we're moving from the past to this year. This is all of the schools that iReady serves nationally, but it's the beginning of the year this year. And so you can see that there's definitely a difference when you look even national to national comparison, that there's about a 6% more students in 3+ grade levels or below, and you've got about 4% more in that lighter red category. And you have about 2% less that are ready to start grade level material. That's that category in the yellow. So if you look all the way to the next column, that is our state, that is Missouri, and that is everybody that iReady again serves just in Missouri, and you can see that's a large pile of kids. Somewhere, right around 145,000 kids. So again, a good stable data set for us to compare ourselves to. And so that is just the kids in Missouri. And what's interesting, when you look at our district, we tested about 6,600 kids. So we are about 3% more kids 3 grade levels and below when you compare to all the schools in Missouri. And we're about 1% higher when you look at 2 grade levels or below. So that is, we'd rather be below in those standards, but we're not terrifyingly off the mark. So we're not, when we look at the summer learning loss that we didn't lose, that's encouraging to us because we know that the learning that is going on in the classroom is robust enough to sustain itself to fall. And so you can also see that we're about 4% less than the rest of Missouri in terms of 1 grade level or below, but then we seem to be tracking pretty closely with early on grade level or mid on grade level in the green areas. So any questions there before I move on? Because that's just math. So the second thing we'll be reading, but it'll be same song, second verse. We'll look at the same data, but I'll just be reading. Any questions there about math that you might have? Okay. So then moving on, again, just as a reminder, and I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but sometimes it helps when you're looking at numbers. we're looking at beginning of the year data, and this is reading. So, again, this is where we're looking at 1920 before the closure, and that was beginning of the year. And then we are looking at 21-22, that was last year, and then beginning of the year this year. So you can see that when we hearken all the way back to pre-COVID, we're about 3% higher in 3 grade levels and below, about 2% higher in 2 grade levels or below, and right around 3% less kids ready to start learning on grade level. And if you look at the kids that are mid or above grade level or early on grade level, we are only 1% off of where we were. And so that's also a good sign that our tier 1 instruction is allowing us to move those kids as well, so that when they come into the classroom and they already know things, that they're not, those percentages aren't declining. And so that is also a strong sign for a focus that we've been working on, which Stacia and really all of us have been working on in terms of improving tier 1 instruction in the classroom with 100+ new teachers, right, Stacia?
Yes.
So then if you look at the very last sheet, okay, the very last sheet that I have for you, again, this is reading, and we're looking again at some bigger data sets to compare to ourselves. So we have our benchmark of historical national norms, and that's fall 18-19, pre-COVID. And then we have national in-school, so that's this year, beginning of the year, the whole nation. It gives you the percentages. And then it breaks it down for the entire state of Missouri, beginning of the year data. And then that last column, that's us, the St. Joe School District. And so you can see when we look all the way back to historical national norms, we've got about 4% higher in 3+ grades or below, 2% higher in 2 grade levels and below. We're right on the mark in terms of kids that are ready to start learning on grade level in reading. We're about 2% lower in early on grade level and 4% lower in terms of mid or on grade level. So that would indicate to us that we've got some work to do, especially with our intervention layer, because we have to utilize that intervention layer to move the kids that are 3+, 2+ grade levels or below. But it also indicates to us that from a tier 1 perspective, in other words, just the instruction all kids get, not the intervention that kids get that might need some extra help. It indicates to us that also needs to be strengthened. And I think one of the encouraging pieces to that is that we rolled out a new Ela Curriculum this year. And it's very user-friendly, and they're doing some substantive pilots, I think, down the road in terms of also pairing that with a resource. And last year we implemented a new math curriculum and a new math resource, had a lot of professional development surrounding that, and I think that that's where you saw a little stronger standing in mathematics from that tier 1 perspective. So all that being said, I'm happy to take questions. We got a whole host of folks that can help answer those questions as well, if you have any. Okay, well, that was just an overview, but that lets you know kind of where we're starting. It's kind of like track season, you know. We're all starting, and some of us are in lane 16 and some of us are in lane 1. So we just have to, but the point is we're watching that so that we can get everybody across the finish line.
Good information.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I did have a comment. So for the kids who are 3 grades levels below, are they still getting the same work as all of the kids who are above where they're at? Okay.
Yes, that's that tier 1 instruction. That's giving them access to grade level standards. And all the research shows that you can't remediate your way to proficiency, so those kids have to have access to those grade level standards.
Okay. But we don't have enough support as interventionists to reach all of the kids that are falling under that grade level, is that correct? Or we do?
I'll let Bethany know.
You are correct.
Okay.
We prioritize the kids
Who
based
are-
off of their test scores and their performance and their gains. And we service the kids that we prioritize.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So for Missouri, it looks like they assessed 136,000 students. So what percentage because that's iReady, so how many does that really represent of all the students in the state of Missouri? Because it can't be everyone.
It's certainly not everyone, and I would have to get back to you on that answer, but it wouldn't take me very long.
Okay. Thank you, Kendra.
Mhm.
So our second item is an ESOL update.
Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to share some demographics of our ESOL department and the students that we have here in the St. Joseph School District, because I think that is something that an awareness will help everybody understand our community and our students here. So the first thing is so I have a short little presentation, and it's an overview. If you guys have questions at the end, I would love to answer. I didn't print anything off, but I did just ask Terry, my administrative assistant, to print them, and so he might be bringing them in, so you'd have something in front of you. I apologize. So first of all, just the languages in St. Joseph. So we have, it varies. This data was taken in September the 20th. And so at that time, we have all of these different languages, Spanish being our most common at 579 students. Chuukese our second at 216, and Burmese at 43. You'll see on the breakout the other languages. We range anywhere from 20 in the upper 20s to 33, 34 different languages at any given time. So that kind of gives you some perspective. One of the things that we could foresee last year is our number of what we call newcomers. Those would be students that are coming in that have not had any English training at all, had really been increasing. Okay, so their education they had been receiving was not in English, basically, from whatever country they were coming from. So these are just some statistics of our newcomers. Again, this data in September. So we had 269 of our students, which, mind you, we're around 1,000 students total right now. So I'll get to that later, but this is the breakdown. We had quite a few new immigrants register in our district. So in the fall of 22, which was just right now in September, we had already had 68 newly enrolled immigrants, which was way above last year's. Currently, though, we have 127 total newcomers for beginning English learners. Our immigrants, as 21-22, we had 61, and 19 SLIFE, which stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. So I want to make sure everybody is aware of that number. We are seeing an increase in SLIFE students, so students that have a year or more of missing education. We have students that are coming in that might have 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So a high schooler could be coming in and have not gone to school since 5th or 6th grade. Okay, so we don't put them in at 5th or 6th grade, we put them in near their age and then try to provide support. So a student with that level of need is going to require a lot more resources to get them where they need to be. So, yes.
Real quick, what age range, is there a certain age that you're seeing an increase in this particular number?
So we do have quite a few middle school and high schoolers, yes. It just seems more apparent because the gap is larger at that level. We do have some elementary, but you know, if we've missed a year in elementary, it's still significant, but you catch up a lot faster. So yeah, but we're seeing more middle school and high school. So as of 21-22, we had 15 total. So like I said, already this year, we've had 19 additional. So, and we're only in, at this time, it was the end of September. You'll see it broke down by the languages too, so of our newcomers. So that's what that bottom part is. So Spanish, 152, and Chuukese 69. Those are our two largest, like I said, and then the other languages are below. So our district statistics for intermediate. So our students take a test called the Access Test every year, and that is how we track their English language development and their acquisition of the language. And it's between January and March when they take this test. So we track that every year to kind of see where our students are, and they get a composite level. It's broke down in different categories, but the composite is their total. So we would say an intermediate student, we have 536, so nearly half of our students that are designated English language learners are in that range. Intermediate, which is the 3.6 or above, we have 216 students. So these students are the ones that are able and more prepared to be going out into the general classroom more often with less supports. So they may be getting more of a collaboration between two teachers, our ESOL teacher and a general education teacher, checking in, maybe some slight modifications, and they are more successful in that general classroom than our students that need to be pulled back into the ESOL classroom more, okay? Just because of the level of supports that we need to be able to provide. The challenge at this level, it's challenging, but it's also exciting. So we want to make sure we're providing enough support that these students can receive the supports they need, but are getting that education to where they are encouraged that they can be independent on their own. And as they're getting more independent, then they're needing that teacher and those accommodations less and less. In order to exit out of our program, with the access test, you have to receive a score, a composite score of 4.7. So this range right here is, a student may be in it for a while until they can exit out. They also can exit through a portfolio. So this would be a time when we're asking teachers to be collecting work samples and making a portfolio. So if a student is successful in the classroom and they're not needing a lot of supports and their portfolio is showing that they are able to perform at grade level like their peers, then we can exit at that time. This last slide, really, I just wanted to show you this comparison. I think this is eye-opening to the changes that have occurred. We have, since 2009, that's the earliest data that I was able to pull with my team. So at that time, we had 314 students that had a designation of an English language learner. Right now, currently, we have 1,030. So that was up 23 students in the last 2 weeks. Right now, we are having a very fast enrollment and growth in our enrollment, basically. In 2009, we had 3 newcomer centers. We really concentrated on those students all went to these 3 schools, and our staff was at those 3 schools. As we have grown, we were able to have students go to their home school so they could be with their neighborhood friends and their peers, and we divided staff out accordingly as we were able to hire more staff. As of right now, we do not have newcomer centers, schools. Students are distributed across all 21 schools. We also have our programming classrooms, and just so that you're aware, we also service our non-public schools. So that is something that a lot of people don't realize, is that we still have an obligation. The funds travel through our district to do some service there for both special education and ESOL. So we do have to send a teacher over to service. It's a much lower amount of time, but it still is servicing those students. So we do go to 4 non-public schools where we have students. In 2009, we didn't have any SLIFE students. We didn't have any with limited or interrupted formal education, but right now we have 37. So big difference. In 2009, we had 9 teaching staff. So their average caseload, and I always go back to what's the caseload. So what is that teacher responsible for? In 2009, the caseload was 34.8 on average when I divide out that number. We have been trying to work towards, and every year we have been hiring staff and increasing staff so that we could try to maintain or stay in that 34 range. Ideally, we'd like to be around 30, which is still higher than any classroom teacher typically at the elementary level anyways. Currently, we're at 24 and a half FTEs. So if we were to get to that same caseload, we would need 5.5 more positions. We have them posted, we just do not have the applicants. We also are currently, we have an assistance program for tuition. So if we hire someone that has a teaching certification and they are willing to go to school, they can apply. It's a 2-year program and we will assist in that tuition. So we just need the applicants in order to do that. So right now our current caseload is 42 students, which is extremely high per teacher. As far as paraprofessionals go, we had 3 paraprofessionals in 2009. We now have 6 paraprofessionals that help assist, and really those paraprofessionals are helping the students when they are in the general education classroom. So what we want, Dr. Lau talked a little bit about Tier 1 instruction. So Tier 1 instruction is that instruction that every single student gets. So our students, all of our students need that Tier 1 instruction. So our ESOL students, we really want to ensure that they have access to that instruction. And so through our paraprofessionals, they are in their classrooms helping so that they can access that education. Because our ESOL teachers primarily do either at the high school level, they have their own classes, but at the elementary, they pull out and receive services that way. So when those students are in the classroom, we're needing to help support them. As far as office staff, this is an area where I see that not only do we need to grow with our teachers, but also with our office staff. This really came to light when we did this comparison study. So if you look at our office staff, we have the same number of office staff as we were operating with in 2009. So mind you, we have a lot of compliance that has to take place for each one of our students and testing, but then also just how we can address helping our families with our family advocates. So we had 2 family advocates, 1 administrative assistant, 1 assessor, and 1 coordinator at the time in 2009. We're pretty much in the same boat of 3 family advocates, 1 administrative assistant, 1 ESOL assessor, and 1 specialist. I think that's 6, yes. And then the good news is we were able to offer a position for a Chukis interpreter. We're very excited about that. We're going to be bringing that to the board at the end of the month. And that should really, as you could see from the languages that we are serving, that's our second most common language. So that's been an area of a challenge. And so we're excited to be able to start meeting the needs of those families. So, any questions?
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on what a newcomer center is?
Yeah, so a newcomer center, we just call them center schools basically, but yes, it was a newcomer center. So when a student would move into our community, they would go to that school. So for example, Edison was a newcomer center when I was there. And so if, say you lived in another attendance area, if you came in and you were here within, the first 1 to 2 years, you would go to that school. You would be bused there. So we had a concentration of staff in that school, so we had 3. It was Hyde, and Humboldt was, but then when Humboldt closed, but Hyde and then Edison and Coleman was just naturally because of who was living in that area at the time. But those were our center schools. And so we had a concentration of staff there and the students were bused there. And then once they got to that, if I go back, let's see if I can do that. Once they got to the level of like a 2.1, then they would go to another school. They would have the option, but one of the things that we found is that we were having students move in all across our community, and all of our staff was mostly at those center schools. So then we had to start having staff in all of our schools because they maybe weren't a newcomer. They were coming in and they just moved from somewhere else and they had a higher score on their access and they were really able to go to the class of their where they lived. And so we were then putting staff in those buildings. So once we put staff in those buildings, it was like, well, really, the students could be serviced in their home building. So that's how that kind of happened. We did look into the possibility, because we kind of could foresee this happening last year, of looking into a middle school or high school model. So before, our newcomer or center school model was only elementary. And so High school, it's a little bit more difficult. We never had any high school before, but we thought, well, that might be a way that we could really concentrate some staff at the middle school and high school. We had more SLIFE students at that time. We looked into it. We were not successful as far as we did not move forward with it for a couple of reasons. I'm not saying it's out of the question. It's a model we're still looking at. There might be a need for as we see more and more families move in with those needs. But we were going to move staff again, and we were really needing still staff in all of our schools, so we weren't able to hire the number that we really were needing to make that successful. We also surveyed our families and of all of our newcomers in the last year. So we had a parent meeting, and then we also called. We had our interpreters call every family member and ask them how they felt, and they unanimously did not want their student going to a different school. They became really comfortable and involved in their home school, and they did not want to move. Now, if we would have done that when they first got here and they didn't know any different, that would be one thing, right? But they were already established. So that's a decision that we'll have to decide moving forward if that's something that would best serve our students. One thing that I do want to bring out is because we could foresee that we're going to have an influx in newcomers. We were able to last year, I don't know if you guys remember, at the very end of the year, we were able to adopt a new curriculum for our newcomers, and we did purchase resources for our newcomers across the board. K-12, 6 through 12 had to do with the new curriculum, and then we have a consistent resource for K-6. So, any other questions?
And I don't know that the model is something that would be advantageous for a school district to adopt, but I think the transition piece is big, because if you had some kind of, I mean, inclusion is definitely end result, but I think transition is a big deal. I mean, I think people, it's just like with our employees, as they come in, you have to make sure that they're trained properly, you have to make sure that they're welcomed, you have to make sure those types of things, and I think from a student standpoint, we need to do the same things.
Yeah. One of the models that we've looked at and we're continuing to look at is not as long-term of a center model, but a shorter center model, to where just an acclimation, really come in, learn the basics of how school works here, basic English so that you can navigate. And then from there, you're ready more for that academic model. So really do a heavy focus on the English and just feeling comfortable and acclimated for a short term, a couple months, whatever we need. And then from there, push out. So that is another model that which really is more of that, how do we transition? Yes?
What is the success rate of a student who's been out maybe 2 or 3 years, coming to our district, and getting back on track to be able to still graduate?
It's a challenge. It definitely is a challenge. So one of the things that happens, depending on when a student moves in to high school, they do fall under, if it's not 9th grade, if you come in as a 9th grader, you still have an expectation to graduate with your credits, just like any other student, those 4 years. However, say if we have an 11th grader come in, they do have, from another country, they do have the option to have an alternative graduation plan. And so at that point, the counselor works with the ESOL teacher and Elizabeth Chase, and they make, and the principal from that school, and they make an alternative graduation plan with the courses that they absolutely have to have, and then they remove, some of those courses, and then it's signed and approved, and so they still need to make those. But it is a huge challenge, I'm just gonna be honest. When you come in and you've missed that much education for any student, your reading level, you may not even be reading English yet at all, and so we're asking them, to be able to complete high school level work. It's a huge challenge. So I don't have a percentage for you, but I'm going to tell you it's a real challenge.
So it would be something like an individualized
So our students all have it's called an English language plan, an ELP. So we have a program that Triumph has paid for us, and it's been absolutely amazing. We have a partnership with Triumph, and it's called Elevation, and it's really our data platform where all of our data, that's where these little charts and everything have come from. All of our data goes into that platform, all of our test scores and everything. And then from there, it gives a plan, kind of similar to like a student with a special education. They have an individual education plan, an IEP. Our students have an English language plan. And so every teacher has that for their students. So they are fully aware what their student is able to do as when it comes to English in all the different areas and next steps. So they have that, and so that's really wonderful. It's just a matter of, at that point, you have to accommodate and modify the work to meet that plan, and that is where the challenge comes when we have such high caseloads and we don't necessarily have the supports we need in the general education classroom for those teachers.
Well, how easy is it to get the parents involved in that? Because if you do it at school, is there a way to encourage that at home? Or get the parents involved also in learning the language or?
We were just having a
customs?
conversation about that. So we do have our family advocates that, they do set in on conferences. We also have our translation lines that we utilize because we don't have enough in-house translators and interpreters. We can offer and we can ask, and so some parents are very, very involved, and others, just like anywhere, it just depends on that. But we do there is some language barriers there, even within the families themselves. That just came to light. Some of our students are becoming very proficient in English, but their parents aren't, and that is a challenge. So we do have an adult ed center, and so they do offer English classes there, so that would be fabulous. That is a challenge. Any other questions?
I just have two really quick questions.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that the ESL program serves for non-public schools. About how many students is that?
I would have to count. I want to say 10 or 12.
I didn't figure it was very many.
No, it's not, and it's typically about 30 minutes a week.
Okay.
So but we do give the access test to all of those students. So we do a screener. So first to identify if they would even qualify for those services. So we've been in the process of that. And then how it works if we receive funds. If they receive funds the year prior, then they have funds to use this year. So there is also a little lag depending on if that school doesn't have any funds. We're not obligated to serve, but we do try to at least give the screener and give them some tools this is how you can help the student.
And then other question is, you mentioned potentially hiring a Chinese interpreter later this year. Do you guys already have a Spanish interpreter?
Yes, so our family advocates, we have 2 full-time, we have 1 part-time, we're just increasing her hours. And then we just are offering also, she's a college student, but another part-time. And so we have those positions posted, so we would be happy to hire more if we had more people apply. So so we have part-time and full-time open right now.
Another thing we are going to do going into next year is expand it to 12 months. We did have a gap there, about a month and a half, I guess. They were on 10.5-month contracts.
Yeah.
And so when they were moving in the summer, we were losing the contact with them. So we are going around the clock this year. There will be 1 week off in the last week of June. We won't have anybody here. Outside of that, then it'll be constant forever.
Any other questions? Feel free to reach out anytime if you guys need any more information or would like to discuss some more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very helpful information. Okay, our next item is attendance update.
I'm going to add to your paper pile. Just 1 page. I just wanted to draw attention to our attendance because, like all of these things we're discussing, it impacts academics. I shared this on Friday with our board members, but I thought it'd be nice to share with our community members as well. And I think we get a lot of media attention here lately with Hosea and Hyde, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that every school building has an attendance plan, an action plan, and they have things in there from incentives to special events, and they have opportunities for kids to go on field trips if they meet a certain percentage. There's a wide variety of interventions and approaches to address our attendance concerns. So you'll see the attendance on this page broken down by school. And you can kind of see where we rank high school, middle school, and then every elementary. And then if you flip it over, you'll see the grade levels. So for this is only for this year. At the end of September, as a district, we're at 80.34%. That means 80.34% of our kids are coming 90% of the time or more. And I just want to report that that is an increase from September of 2021. At the end of September 2021, our district was at 74.72%. So we're not where we want to be as a district, but we have increased almost 6%. So I think we are coming out of the pandemic. We are putting some interventions, some action plan steps in place at individual buildings. We're doing our best to cover those events and get the message out there to our community, our parents, our stakeholders that attendance is important. And so if you have any questions about attendance, I'd be happy to answer those. We do push this out to our principals every month. Every school building has a leaderboard where the kids can see what our stats are at that building. They can also see where they fall as far as grade level goes. So it becomes a bit of a competition in the buildings, which I think is a good thing.
What's the realistic percentage goal? If 80 is not where we want to be.
We want to be at 90.
Okay.
We want all kids to be at school 90% of the time. Really, we used to have a campaign, Strive for 5, meaning kids miss just 5 days in a school year. And that's what employers would like to see, if you could miss less than 5 days in a year at work. But really, from DESE's standpoint, we want kids 90% of the time.
If it's 90% of the time, how many school days missed is that?
18.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of grace.
Yeah.
And you think about it from an employment standpoint, if you missed 18 days of work, you wouldn't have a job, right? And so I really think that the good thing, as we continue to promote this, a lot of the employers in town they're understanding the challenges that we're facing, and they're really wanting to help us, to assist us in that way. So I think it'll get better. I don't know that 90 is attainable, but I do think we can continue to increase by a little bit.
I'll piggyback on what you just said with business partnerships. We have a lot of businesses who also help. Buffalo Wild Wings will donate wings for attendance pet assemblies, things like that. Just different businesses that are going to Hyde and Hosea and all of our elementaries to greet kids in the morning. So I am very thankful for our business partners and their assistance with this initiative. Anything else for me?
This is an average percentage, so, right, so there's a certain percentage of kids that are missing a lot more.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the percent of kids who are coming to school 90%.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you just take Carden Park, they're at 80.83. That means 80.83% of their kids are coming 90% of the time or more, meaning roughly 20% are not. And that 20% could miss, they could be at 57% attendance, or they could be at 83% attendance. You know what I mean? So it could vary.
Really horrible attendance by 50 kids that brings down the average for the rest of them.
They would just factor as one count, if that makes sense.
And our attendance interventionist, I know we have hired some, is that correct? Are they targeting the schools where they have the lowest percentage of attendance?
They are, and I may have Kendra chime in on that one. I think we have 7 hired now, is that
We're
correct?
Up to 7, maybe even 8 now. We meet with them every week. They've been trained by parent-teacher home visits. They are learning how to create family engagement plans. And then on the 26th, Dr. Harris, I think for those of you that were in the MSIP 6 meeting, she's coming to train them and helping them better engage with families. And so we really are trying to put them at every school, but they originally were a place where we have hotspots. But they really have moved from looking for kids that have not shown up to moving to helping kids grow. So if you, for example, you're at 84% attendance, we would love it if you got to, 87% attendance. So that tiered intervention, I mean, that's a lot of where our kids are is obviously in that realm. And so they're really helping incentivize those groups, reaching out to families, and trying to celebrate growth for kids that are never recognized. And so that is really helping those kids, feel like they've got some agency and know that the more they show up to school, the better their outcomes are going to be. So they're doing a lot of education with families. So, yeah.
Okay.
And so now that we have this analysis, we'll be looking through the lens of what the impact is of attendance interventionists, their caseload, how many cases they close. In other words, they're getting kids on a winning streak and keeping them there. And then we'll be looking at those different variances so we know whether or not that's a workforce group that we're going to continue to invest in.
That makes more sense to me. I like the continued improvement concept because that was the MSIP 6 goal anyway.
Yep.
And small margins of success are probably more realistic.
It really is, and this attendance I gave, Dr. McGinnis, it's 2 pages of calculations to get to this type of attendance. It's not just your average daily attendance, but it really does monitor chronic absenteeism. Like Dr. Edgar pointed out, 18 days, a couple days, 2 or 3 days a month really has negative impacts on kids' future outcomes. So they really, under MSIP 6 and revised MSIP 5, they gave kids, they're awarding kids points in this calculation. So if you move from, say, an 82% to an 87.5%, then as a school district, we profit from that gain mathematically, but it also profits the kid. So it's kind of a win-win. So it's not an all or nothing. You're either a 90 or you're not. It's if you keep making growth, that's awarded.
I think that's really important. I'm only, I'm a little cautious of taking all of the attention away from the kids who really need it to the ones who we're trying to push to be better.
Yeah.
I understand it because it's like, well, when more kids get rewarded, then these kids are going to be like, well, I want to get rewarded too. But it's like we have to still have attention on the kids who aren't coming to school because kind of have a balance of both.
Yeah, you need that blend of, the kids that are always showing up, you don't want to ignore them.
Right.
But at the same time, you've got to pay attention to the kids that aren't showing up all the time.
Right, yeah.
And how do you change that behavior? And it's a heavy lift because there's a lot of barriers to good attendance. The same barriers to attendance are the same barriers to healthcare. So transportation, mobility, food scarcity, under-resourced, and so that's what Dr. Harris is going to be helping our attendance interventionists with, is how to connect families to those resources and reduce some of those barriers. Just something like stability is something that we see a lot in terms of housing. So we had a cohort analysis last week in our data review meetings where one of our schools tracked all the way from kindergarten to 6th grade, the kids, how they matriculated through their scores and what the impact of that school was on that cohort of students? Well, it turns out 10 of them that started in kindergarten, only 10, or all of the kids that started in kindergarten, only 10 were the same students in kindergarten in 6th grade. So that is tough on kids because we lose them for 2 weeks at a time when they unenroll, move, get to another spot. And so that is a big impact on their attendance and obviously then on other outcomes. But attendance is the leading indicator because we take attendance every day. It's our most sensitive metric we have in the school district on kids. So it helps us know what needs to change and improve for those kids quickly.
And do we tell the parents that they have kind of a limited amount of time to enroll their kids after taking them out from one school to the other?
Yes.
I don't think they're gonna list, sometimes there's just a delay.
It really
To be
is.
honest with you, it takes about 7 or 8 days, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's about what we talked about when we talked about mobility. It's unfortunate. And what they're doing in that transition, they're losing 3 months worth of learning.
Yeah.
Moving from one school to the next. And now what we said, calculated, it, they're losing 3.
If they're gone for 2 weeks, they lose 3 months.
Well, in the transition from
If
school
you
to
add it all
school,
up, yeah.
if you add it all up, they're losing 3 months worth of learning.
I mean,
Because it takes them 5 or 6 days to get acclimated again, you know, I mean, the transition's not good. And I'll be honest with you, she talked about.
That makes no sense.
They also move multiple times.
They move multiple
it's a
times.
revolving door.
It's not just the 2 weeks.
So we're looking at something from a transportation standpoint. So this is what we have going on, is we have people that move from the north end to Carden Park, to Hosea, back to Lindbergh, all in 1 year, okay? And so that student is, I mean, losing all kinds of education because it takes 5 to 7 days for the parents to get them there. And then the transition to the new school. Why not, what we're trying to do is we're talking to the transportation department about building a cloud around that. And then we transport those kids. So if they move from Lindbergh to Carden Park to Hosea, we just leave them in Lindbergh or leave them in Carden Park or leave them in Hosea and just transport them. So we're looking into that. But the high mobility she was talking about are in our largest schools. When I talked to Lacey about Carden Park, she had tracked that. There was 11 kids. This is our largest elementary school, our largest population. 11 kids went from kindergarten to 6th grade. That's it. And I don't even know what their cohort size is, but it's pretty good size,
Almost
right?
100.
100.
Are you saying they went from kindergarten to 6th grade without moving?
Without moving, yeah. 11 out of 100.
Wow.
Like 10%.
And Lindbergh and Hosea are your other two that have, I don't know which one you tracked that had 10, but it was probably,
well, that was
it probably wasn't Pershing.
that was Coleman,
Coleman.
and Edison is another one. So we had, last year, we looked at it just from August to Christmas. And, I mean, we had some kids moving as many as 6 times during that time. So that housing instability is a real concern. So and we know it shows up first in attendance. It'll show up in the scores, but it shows up first in attendance. So if we can help that, we can help the other.
Yeah. So back to your point, they're not losing 90 days of instruction. I think that's what you were thinking in your
I
mind.
moved a lot growing up, so
Yeah.
I didn't.
I'm just talking. This is all research based. That's what the research is telling us, that whenever they move that much, that's the loss that we're creating.
So and I know we have to move on, but do the interventionalists, since that has to do with the parent, not the child, so do the interventionalists have any interaction with the parents, with the students that have a higher?
That's what we're trying to, yes.
They do
Yes.
home visits, they
Yeah.
send letters, they make phone calls, they meet with the parents and find out what barriers are. They can provide resources, so if food is an issue,
Okay,
they
good.
can lead them. They have social workers they can connect with.
So it's more than just encouraging the child
Correct.
to grow in attendance, because
Sure.
that may
Yes,
be
it's
what's not
really
in their
about
control.
parent engagement.
Right. Well, you look at kindergarten at 78%. I mean, there's no way kindergarten, that's all parents,
Yes.
right? So it's not like the kid could say, I want to go to school today.
Yeah, I wonder why that's the biggest one that we're missing.
Kindergarten is, historically, it's kind of like, it's high in kindergarten, it kind of does this, and it goes up again in 12th grade. But kindergarten, just historically, is parents sometimes, and it's incumbent upon us and as a community to continue to remind folks that it's not just, you know, finger painting and all those things, playing in the sand and whatnot, but it is really very, very much something that we have to consider as critically important. And we even see that in preschool.
And then I've learned a lot of the parents, they look at preschool and kindergarten as optional.
Yeah.
So would you suggest, so 11 kids out of pocket, would you suggest that we just transport them until the end of the year? Because if we continue to do that until 6th grade, we would.
No, yeah, we're just gonna pilot it to see how it works. We haven't put it in yet, but we had talked about K2, you know, or something along those lines.
Trying to stabilize it early.
Yeah. Try to fix the problem in the beginning.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it wouldn't be financially prudent to do that.
So that'd be 89 kids eventually.
Right.
But it really is an equity issue for those kids. It's not, but it's something the school district is taking on to try to provide equity that the kids don't have outside of, in our intervention.
Thank you, Ashley, for that information. Our next item is Webster's Graduation Academy Program.
I'm just gonna talk a little bit about how that has come about and the progression. Ashley might have to help me a little bit with Aspire.
Sure.
Because I don't, how many years ago was that?
3, I believe. I think we just did that 3 years.
Okay, so 3 years ago, Webster was housing those students that were credit deficient. And so you could go as a sophomore, your second semester sophomore, if you were behind, I believe it was 10 credits or less at that point in time. And what was happening is they were going to Webster and the intent was to recover some credits and then go back to your home building. The success rate of that was very minimal. I believe John Slanky told me maybe 3 students ever returned to their home building. And there were a lot of students, I don't know how many they were allowed to send at that time, but so from that point on, what was happening is those students are sitting there as second semester sophomores. They're going as juniors, still credit, and they're still working towards credits at that point in time. And then when they became seniors, at that point, they would go into the Missouri Options program. The Missouri Options is where if a student, they take the HiSET test, and also if they can pass, if they pass personal finance, government, and health, then they are able to graduate from their home building as far as a graduate from St. Joe School District, but they do not walk through the graduation exercises with that home building. They have a Webster graduation. So that's kind of the platform of why we have moved to Graduation Academy. So this is the first year. I have a little bit of data from our first 2 months of school, and I'll share that with you. But what is happening now is, especially from the pandemic, we have a lot of deficient students, credit deficient students. And so our goal is to really focus on our 12th graders at this very moment in time to hopefully help them graduate. And so what they have done is Benton and Lafayette each were able to send 25 students and Central had 50. The part of grandfathering in, we have some 11th graders that are sitting there that were from their 10th grade year as well. So I hope that makes sense. So we did not push them back to the building at this time because they were very credit deficient as well. So when they go now to Webster, we do a locator test first. So locator test allows them to, the staff to know what courses those students need, because in the past, you just went into, everybody just took the same course, didn't matter, but now they can identify where their strengths are and where they need additional supports, and that's the courses that they're enrolled in. Stacia and her team developed the coursework for the HiSET prep test, and so there's 4 different areas. Students now can take their courses are identified by course subjects, and so they take the different subset tests. They don't have to go take all of the tests at one shot. They can go and take it at different times. And once they pass all of the tests and their big 3, they're going to be graduates. So it looks a little bit different because nothing, all of the work is not credit bearing anymore. they're working towards the high set so they can be graduates. And so that's kind of the progression of where we are at this very moment in time. Really our goal, I believe, is we would like to see some of this work be able to happen within the high school building so those students remain part of their home school eventually. That's going to take a little bit of time. We also, right now, we have 2 that have already graduated this year, so that's super exciting. It's, October. We have 19 that have passed at least one of the subset tests. We have 10 that have passed at least 2, and we have 9 that have passed 3 of them. Okay, so we're on the right track. Our hope was that it would expedite some of those students to graduate so then we can fill the slots with those kids that are still in the building. We just made the decision that we're going to increase the numbers for this. They go on quarters. They run on quarters there. So we're going to increase. We've allowed 20 more to come into the program there due to the numbers that we have at the building that are still so deficient. And so we're excited about that. Typically, you guys, they're not, they can be anywhere from, some could have 0 credits to 1 to, we could go up to probably 15 or 16. And we've also added, just on a little side note, we've added a 0 hour to support our kids in the building that are like super, super close. They're working towards 24.5. So if they're that close, we've added the 0 hour and they're using some of our staff for closing the gap, that they're kind of like their coach in the building, and hoping that we can move that crew through that way. We have a little halt at this very moment because the high set company has sold to PSI. It should be fixed soon, but we are kind of on a holding pattern so they can take tests at this very, like right today and this week. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's a different pathway, but really we're trying everything we can do to help those students, especially due to the pandemic. I believe the number, and Ashley could respond as I was in high school, has really increased as far as the deficiencies.
Closing the gap seems to be beneficial in a lot of ways.
I think in this case, it's really that, like a true instructional coach for that person. Just kind of that motivator and accountability, probably more than anything in that situation. So
they can graduate and get their diploma before the end of the year?
Yeah, as long as they have the big 3. So our right now, when we put in, we're really tracking those that already have the big 3 to look, because we really want to, if they have the big 3 and we're even looking at attendance, because we don't want to fill slot. If a student's not attending school now, it's going to be, we want to try to get those that are going to really try to see if we can make a movement with those kids. Because I struggle a little bit if they've been in the building for 4 years and then here comes May and they don't graduate. That's hard for me to swallow. I would hope everybody would be hard piece, but. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Could it be possible that these kids could still walk, or is there a reason that?
They do with Webster. They do with Webster. I would like if we can make the move where you can offer some of this in our high schools, like in our sites. I would want them to be part of our, whatever high school they would walk, I think. Because I think a lot of times, even if this is the path they're heading, we have some students that are still involved in our extracurricular, our fine arts, our Hilliard. We want them to be part of that, to continue. I would. So even if they're that credit deficient that we can't get them to the 24.5.
I agree with David. I know that it's a little thing, only being able to walk is like a big thing. Like, I just completed, I'm a master's and I'm not able to walk, and I'm really upset about it, and so just to be able to walk, I think it would make a difference in a lot of the kids' lives.
I agree. I do. I think part of right now, I think if we could push it back and have some supports in the building, I totally see that.
Yeah.
Also to understand these students, which I didn't say up front, these students attend half a day at Webster. It's a hybrid schedule, so they have a half a day there, and they have 2 VA courses on the afternoon or the morning side of it. Mm-hmm. And so, you would like to think kids don't necessarily want to go that direction, but we also don't want it to maybe advertise that that's a, does that make sense?
It's a desirable option. Yeah.
We don't, we probably
I get what
we
you're
don't want
saying.
more Missouri option graduates than graduates, I
Yeah.
would think. So that would be the only,
Yeah,
but
I
I
see
think
what
if
you're
they're
saying.
part of our building full day, and that looks totally different walking, even if it's a high set direction, I would agree. So, any other questions about graduate academy? It's exciting, I think, that hopefully we can expedite some of them through, I hope, yeah, especially with the
It encourages
pandemic.
them.
Yeah.
The 3 sections that you're saying, health and what are the 3?
Health, personal finance, and government, the big 3.
Personal finance, can you elaborate a little bit?
On personal finance?
Yeah, we'll just what it entails.
Well, I'm just gonna tell you, I went in last year, I learned a lot about taxes. So, just your typical financial skill set, budgeting the whole.
I mean, I think it's a
just
great
think about
idea,
it.
yeah.
It's a really good
I'd
class,
like
but I'm gonna tell you, I did
to-
learn a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't tell my
Is there, and I'm unaware, is there a subject on that in our high school right now?
We have to
Oh,
offer.
everybody, it's required for
That's
graduate.
right.
Yeah, it's required, yeah, everybody has the personal finance, it's been around for
Quite a while.
For a long time,
Yeah.
yeah.
I taught it, that's how long it's been around.
I'll tell them a lot about that. Health, most of our kids will take the health course early on in their like freshman or sophomore year, so they usually have done a lot of, and then personal finance, typically they're juniors is when they try to pull that off.
Thank you, Laura.
You're so welcome.
I did teach in 2002.
Okay, if nobody has any questions, we're just gonna go ahead.
Just an FYI, the academics committee is a board committee, and the board has 4 committees: policy, finance, facilities, and academics. Each committee has a board chair. We've gotten away from board members facilitating these meetings, but as we move forward, the goal is to get back to that. So that's all I have.
Thank you, David. We are gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
David, will you check the